In a shocking turn of events, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's war strategy, which he once believed would guarantee Israel's security, has collapsed into personal vulnerability. This is the moment Netanyahu feared more than any military threat during his entire political career. Beneath the Sira military headquarters in Tel Aviv, the secure communications hub, usually brimming with activity, was eerily silent. The seats were empty, the phones were quiet, and for the first time in 14 months of relentless conflict, Netanyahu could not control the narrative. Instead of real-time battlefield intelligence, the screens now displayed something much more damaging. Iranian state media was broadcasting live footage of precision missile strikes hitting a compound in northern Tel Aviv, the very compound where Netanyahu was meeting with his inner security cabinet just 90 minutes before the attack. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC, took credit for the successful strike on Netanyahu's operational headquarters, marking a turning point in a conflict that had already seen its fair share of casualties. As the hours passed, the Israeli government, already under intense pressure from Washington and suffering from declining approval ratings at home, was blindsided by something far worse than another missile strike. This time, the weapon used against Israel wasn't just a missile, it was an information weapon. The calculated release of this strike's details sent shockwaves through Netanyahu's political circle, revealing just how fractured his leadership had become. In this deep dive, we'll explore what happened in the 90 minutes before the attack, revealing the chaos and discord within the Israeli government. We'll uncover leaked conversations from inside Netanyahu's cabinet meetings that show the cracks in his inner circle. For Netanyahu, this attack was more than just another escalation in a regional conflict. It was the beginning of the end. The very leader who gambled everything on military might was now watching that gamble turn against him. His leadership wasn't just facing military pressure, he was being isolated and abandoned by allies. In fact, the weight of this crisis was breaking him psychologically, and he had nowhere to hide. What follows is not just the story of a military operation gone wrong, but the unraveling of a leader who once promised to restore Israel's security. 18 months ago, Netanyahu made a bold promise to the Israeli people. He vowed that his military operation would restore security and deterrence that had been slowly eroding over the years. He claimed that within 6 months, Israel would eliminate Hamas as a military force, neutralize Hezbollah along the northern border, and bring Iran to the negotiating table through overwhelming Israeli military dominance. This was supposed to be a decisive victory, one that would forever reshape the Middle East security landscape. But things haven't gone as planned. Netanyahu's gamble was one that not only risked military losses, but also the very fabric of Israel's diplomatic relationships. To achieve his goals, he sacrificed ties with European allies who had stood by Israel for decades. He burned bridges with the Biden administration, which had privately warned against the scale of the offensive. And he destroyed years of diplomatic efforts with the Arab world, turning the United Nations Security Council into a hostile space. But even as opposition voices within Israel grew louder, Netanyahu remained steadfast, dismissing any calls for restraint or a ceasefire. For months, critics, including former military commanders and intelligence chiefs, warned that the operation was spiraling beyond its intended scope. They argued that the international backlash was becoming unbearable and that the economic costs were starting to crack the foundation of Israel's high-tech economy. But Netanyahu ignored them. He refused to accept ceasefire proposals and pressed forward with his plan. He believed that history would vindicate him and that the critics would be nothing but footnotes in the grand narrative of Israel's future. But what Netanyahu didn't account for was the determination of his adversaries. While he believed that overwhelming military force would restore Israel's dominance, his enemies were adapting, finding ways to turn Israel's strength into weakness. By continuing the military campaign at all costs, Netanyahu wasn't just playing a dangerous game with military strategy, he was playing with Israel's future. At 3:15 a.m., local time in Tel Aviv, the situation took a dramatic turn. Iranian missiles launched from 3 different locations, streaking through the night sky towards Israel's heart. For 47 seconds, Israel's state-of-the-art air defense systems tracked the incoming missiles. Then, as designed, the Iron Dome intercepted 83% of the incoming projectiles. But missile defense isn't foolproof. It's a math problem. No matter how sophisticated the system, when enough missiles are launched, some will always get through. Witnesses near the Ark and Park areas described the moments before impact, 3 distinct flashes in the pre-dawn darkness, followed by a rolling thunder-like sound that echoed across the city. At 3:17 a.m., emergency services received the first call reporting a massive explosion in the government district. Another call came in just seconds later, reporting structural damage to a building with heavy security barriers. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps wasted no time, issuing a statement just minutes after the strikes, claiming responsibility and specifically noting that Netanyahu and his war cabinet were present at the time of the attack. But while the missiles were still in flight, 3 other crises began unfolding simultaneously. As the strike made headlines, the financial markets began reacting. Credit default swaps on Israeli government bonds spiked 27%. International traders from Singapore to Dubai were calculating risk, and their conclusion was clear. Israel's political instability, combined with military vulnerability and international isolation, meant heightened risk to the country's financial future. Meanwhile, in Washington, the secure hotline between the Pentagon and Israeli Defense Forces went silent. American officials were no longer answering the phone, waiting for the White House National Security Council to assess the situation. They weren't willing to commit to a coordinated response until they knew who was in control of Israel's operations. Netanyahu was now facing a crisis that was not just military, it was political, financial, and strategic. The political fallout from this attack didn't stop with financial markets. As the emergency response unfolded in Tel Aviv, a bombshell leak emerged from inside Netanyahu's own government. At exactly 3:31 a.m., a cabinet minister, whose identity is being protected, sent a text message to a group of 23 Knesset members. The message contained 4 words that would change everything. He was in there. This was confirmation that Netanyahu had been present in the compound when it was struck, a fact that would shake the very foundation of his leadership. The message quickly spread, and oil markets responded almost immediately. Crude futures spiked 11% in under 6 hours. The question traders were asking wasn't about the specifics of the missile strike, but about Israel's ability to maintain stability. With a nuclear-armed leader possibly targeted in the heart of Tel Aviv, what did this mean for global supply chains? And more importantly, what did it mean for Israel's military command? At 4:10 a.m., Israel's security cabinet convened in an undisclosed bunker location to assess the situation. The meeting was unlike anything in Israeli political history. Present were the defense minister, foreign minister, finance minister, and senior military officials. But the subject of the meeting was not military response. It was the question that no one wanted to ask. Where exactly is the prime minister, and who is in command? The answer they received was chilling. The military secretary's response to the defense minister's direct question about Netanyahu's whereabouts was a long, uncomfortable silence. When he finally spoke, he said that visual confirmation of Netanyahu's location was still being established. This moment highlighted the deep crisis in Israeli leadership. Either Netanyahu was injured in a location so secure that communication was difficult, or there was a breakdown in command structure so severe that basic protocols were not functioning. In the hours following the attack, Netanyahu's fate hung in the balance. The cabinet ministers and military officials present in the bunker realized that the political moment created by the missile strike could be used to force a transition they had been hesitant to initiate. The decision was made. If Netanyahu could not or would not appear publicly and demonstrate command authority within 6 hours, emergency protocols would be enacted. The military establishment knew they were running out of time. If Netanyahu failed to regain control, the government would be forced into a political transition. They wouldn't call it a removal, at least not officially, but they would state that during a period of active military crisis, executive authority would be temporarily shared with the defense minister to ensure continuity of command. This moment, this decision, marked the beginning of the end for Netanyahu's political future. As the meeting concluded, one of the senior military commanders made a chilling comment. 18 months of this, and now we are here. We told him this would happen. These words spoke volumes about Netanyahu's isolation from his own military leadership. It was no longer just a political failure, it was a military one as well. Iran's calculated move was designed not only to strike at Netanyahu, but to shake the entire foundation of Israel's security. The missile strike was not intended to kill Netanyahu. It was a calculated message meant to create the chaos and confusion now enveloping Israel's political and military leadership. With Iran demonstrating the ability to strike at the heart of Israeli power, the narrative had shifted. No longer could Netanyahu claim that Israel was invulnerable or that his military strategy was delivering results. For regional players, this moment has profound implications. Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Egypt, and others are now recalculating their relationships with Israel. They once partnered with Israel because of its military might and technological prowess, but now they are questioning if they can rely on a country whose prime minister may have been targeted in his own capital. As the political pressure mounts, Netanyahu faces the real possibility of legal consequences, political collapse, and a complete reordering of Israel's security doctrine. What was once seen as an overwhelming military response is now perceived as a catastrophic failure, one that could reshape the entire Middle Eastern geopolitical landscape. Netanyahu's fate may very well lie in the hands of his own coalition, as the country faces its most severe political crisis in modern history. The moment is here. Will Netanyahu be able to hold on, or will his government collapse under the weight of its own contradictions? Only time will tell. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to stay updated on this developing situation.